Welcome to the next chapter, Directive Principles of State Policy. The directive principles of state policy are enumerated in Part 4 of the Constitution from Article 36 to 51. And the framers of the Constitution borrowed this idea from Irish Constitution of 1937, which had copied from the Spanish Constitution. So it's very much important that you remember the Irish Constitution, because Irish Constitution is being asked in, you can be asking your prelims like, um, where was the directive principle of state policy, which was in the part 4 of the Constitution, borrowed from? So it would be from the Irish Constitution. Then directive principles, along with fundamental rights, contain the philosophy of the Constitution, and they are the soul of the Constitution. Remember that, okay? Directive principle is the philosophy of the Constitution and the soul of the Constitution. So now let's get to the features. So its features include: Dpsp denotes the ideals that the state should keep in mind while formulating policies and enacting laws. So that means to make them aware before, to make them aware that while formulating policies and enacting laws, they have to, maintain the ideals that the Constitution wants, okay? And the directive principles, it constitutes a very comprehensive economic, social, and political program for a modern democratic state. And then the directive principles are non-judiciable, which means they are not legally enforceable by the court for their violation. And these principles are fundamental in the governance of the country, and it shall be the duty of the state to apply these principles in making laws. And one thing, Dpsp is non-judiciable, but it sometimes, it helps the court in examining, in determining the Constitution's validity of the law. Okay, because sometimes, Dpsp, it reminds the lawmakers, the policy formulators, to keep the, ideals in mind. So it may not be judiciable in nature, but it helps the courts. Okay, it helps the courts in examining, and determining it. And the framers of the Constitution made the Dpsp non-judiciable and legally enforceable, because, so now this can be a question, so you can use this as your mains. Okay, so the because they are non-enforceable, non-judiciable, because the country does not possess sufficient financial resources to implement them. Actually, Dpsp is a very beautiful, it has very beautiful ideals, and if it could be followed, then it would make the country prosper. But at the same time, to make it possible, we require sufficient financial resources, and India is not that, you know rich to ensure and implement it, so they make it non-judiciable and non-enforceable. And the presence of vast diversity and backwardness in the country would stand in the way of their implementation. Okay, and a newly born independent Indian state with its many preoccupations might be crushed under the burden unless it was free to decide the order, the time, the place, and the mode of fulfilling them. Okay, so these framers, they keep this pragmatic view, and then they refrain from giving, these principles enforceably into the Constitution. So, what are the distinctions that fundamental rights and Dpsp has? Okay, so fundamental rights and Dpsp. Okay, let's see what the fundamental rights of the Dpsp has. So they are justiciable and legally enforceable. Okay, when there's a violation. But for Dpsp, non-justiciable, they're not legally enforceable, on their violations. So these are the differences, okay? And for the fundamental rights, their aim is to have a political democracy in the country. But DPSP thinks of social and economic democracy in the country. So that means money. It needs money to implement it, okay? That's why. Now you must have understand why fundamental right is justiciable and DPSP is not. So it's the social and economic democracy that they were aiming for. That's the reason. So fundamental rights have legal sanctions. DPSP has moral and political sanctions. Okay? And they promote the welfare of the individual. They're personal and individualistic. But DPSP, they think for the welfare of the community. They're societarian and socialistic. Okay? That's a very big thing. Because, changing one person is a bit, better and very much less time consuming. So but when you are trying to change a community, it takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of time. That's why I think DPSP is being, it's considering the community, they're being socialistic. So that's why it's being made non-enforceable, but it's a very beautiful approach, because if you're able to enforce the everything that's mentioned in the DPSP, then I think there's no other peaceful, beautiful, prosperous country than the India would be. And then they require legislation for the implementation, and they are not automatically enforced. But for fundamental rights, they do not require any legislation or further implementation, because they're automatically enforced. Like right to live, right to have the freedom of speech, I think this is already automatically we're being enforced. We don't need to ask for legislation to implement it. Okay, no need to apply for applications and then blah 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 everything. But for DPSP, in order to implement it, you need to you need to go and then have some legislation process. Okay, so the Champakam Darai Rajan case of 1951, the Supreme Court ruled that in any case of conflict between fundamental rights and the DPSP, the fundamental rights would prevail. So fundamental rights is more valued than DPSP. It's the value is being added to fundamental rights. So it's declared that DPSP had to conform, means to run with rules and run as subsidiary to the fundamental rights. And then the Planning Commission was established in 1950 to take up the development of the country in the planned manner. But the successive 5-year plan aimed at securing socio-economic justice and reducing inequalities of income, status, and opportunity. And in 2015, this planning commission was replaced by a new body called Niti Aayog, which means National Institution for Transforming India. Niti's full form, National Institution for Transforming India. So, for improving the condition of the rural masses, they include these measures. Okay, abolition of intermediaries like zamindars, jagirdars, inamdars, abolition. Okay, tenancy reforms like security of tenure, fair rents, etc. Because most of the rural masses, they're being engaged with agriculture, with farm, with poultry, everything related with farm things. So in order to make the rural area developed, improved, then we have to make their work environment conditions, everything improved. So that's why they're aiming to abolish the zamindars, inamdars, jagirdars. And then next would be security of tenure and fair rents, because rent can be drastically destroying the economy of the rural area. And next would be imposition of ceilings of land holdings, distribution of surplus land among landless laborers, cooperative farming. So cooperative farming is quite great. So the articles in DPSP. So let's see how beautiful DPSP is. 36, definition of state, application of principles contained in this part, state to secure social order for promotion of welfare of people. 39 says certain principles of policy to be followed by the state. 39A says equal justice and free legal aid. 40 says organization of village panchayats. 41 says right to work, to education, to public assistance in certain cases. And next will be 42, which means provision for just and humane conditions of work and maternity relief. And 43, it's living wage, etc. for workers. And 43A, it is participation of workers in management of industries. And next 43B is the promotion of cooperative societies. 44, it's the uniform civil code for the citizens. 45, it's the provision for early childhood care and education to children below the age of 6 years. It's very beautiful. 46 is the promotion of educational and economic rights in SC, ST, and other weaker sections. So, it's very good. And 47, it's the duty of the state to raise the level of nutrition and standard of living and improve public health, because health is wealth. India's health, it lies in maintaining nutrition level and standard of living of the people, and that's how India's rank would be higher, would be improving year by year. Excuse me. And 48, organization of agriculture and animal husbandry. 48A, protection and improvement of environment and safeguarding of forests and wildlife. 49, protection of monuments and places, objects of national importance. 50 is the separation of judiciary from executive. Yes, the judiciary needs to manage the law and order of control of the country independently, without any influence from the legislative or the executive, because justice should be given to every individual, and justice must be met. Everyone needs to be justified. No one should be left in with injustice. Okay, so we have to separate the judiciary from the executive, and that's how we can maintain the honor of getting justified. And 51 will be promotion of international peace and security. So here comes the end of the chapter. So I feel that this chapter is very much important. It's short, but at the same time you need to make sure that you understand the principle, the ideals that Dpsp wants to give to you, so that you can add this in your mains answer paper, because it's not just about prelims. The chapters, the information that I'm adding in just 10-20 minutes, it may be less, but at the same time you need to take this much of time to revise when you're going for your exam, and you don't need to write the whole page on your answer paper. You have to take out important information and insert those important informations into their specific appropriate questions. So that's how you're gonna get your mark, and I'm sure that this would make you understand better and make you more open your eyes more on how to answer and how to find out the important parts. So I'm mentioning some part like this would be important in mains, in prelims, because when I was going through the book, I kind of found out that this paragraph, it would be very much important, and it would be beautiful if we add this in the mains answer paper. Sometimes we find that this can be asked in the question paper, and that's why I kind of highlighted that this would be good in mains or prelims. So make sure that you understand it better and do it properly. Thank you so much.